Okay, I don't need to call our panelists. Please take your seats. Thank you. But I will introduce you. We will wait. You can sit as you want. Like, yeah. We are going to wait, not wait, we will start our discussion, but also we are waiting for our representative from Ukraine, from the office of the president, Ihor Zhovkva. He will come soon. But I hope that we can immediately, of course, start our discussion. And our second panel dedicated to more practical issue, but very important one, how we are going to advocate this acceleration of the process of Ukrainian membership in Brussels, and how should we position ourselves, not just in Brussels, but also among EU member states, because, of course, it is a very difficult exercise. So many member states with their own interests, with their own vision. I remember the moment when we've been trying to get the visa liberalization decision, and in the Netherlands we had a problem with referendum, and I was there. I was advocating for Ukraine, and it was a huge problem because people, they didn't even understand why do they need to vote? They've been thinking that they're voting for membership of Ukraine, you know? And of course, this kind of manipulations and new political circles, they're going to influence a lot. And we already heard from your colleagues that it's going to take time. It's not going to be an easy task. So, of course, I think that for our colleagues from civil society, political circles, it's very important to understand where is painful, probably issues in terms of positioning. Maybe somewhere we shouldn't really push too much, and where is opportunity for Ukraine? You know, how should we build around this? And maybe I can start from Marja Rislakki, if it's possible. Yes, just to tell us a little bit about, domestic kitchen, and how would you suggest to build this strategy for Ukraine?
Thank you very much for your question, and I'm very happy to be here. And as I started, I would like to congratulate you for opening the accession negotiations in the Intergovernmental Conference last month. And you have managed to achieve this first step despite this extremely difficult situation that you are in at the moment. So this is the beginning of the negotiation phase, and it's going to take time, it's going to be burdensome, and there are going to be, as you said, difficult issues on the table to tackle. But however, I'm very sure that the Ukraine will keep up the same determination and the progress as you have done so far. And we are here to help you, all of us. So let's go then to the advocacy, positioning yourself. As I have experience, especially from the council side, maybe I first would like to raise up this issue. Of course, the Commission is your most important counterpart during this path towards the EU accession. The Commission conducts the negotiations on behalf of the whole European Union. But then one must remember that the Council must agree unanimously to the formal opening and closing of each negotiating chapter, as well as all other parts of the negotiations. So this is very important to remember. And this decision-making, the consensus decision-making, gives really a veto possibility throughout the negotiations to each and every member state. I was the Finnish representative in the enlargement working group over 20 years ago when we had this big enlargement and 10 members joined the union. And I can assure you that we were having a long nights negotiating the challenges, and it was difficult for the European Union side too. So there were questions on derogations, on transitional periods, and on both sides. So it was tough negotiating, but finally and happily it ended in a Copenhagen summit in 2003. So this is why it is so important to focus on the member states too. It is important that the member states understand your positions, but it is as important to you to understand the positions, sensitivities of the member states and why they are sensitivities. So then you can kind of cope in the negotiations, and if you have a mutual understanding, it's easier to find a solution. That's clear. So that's my first advice, be in very close contact with the Council and the EU member states separately. The second one, of course, is that when we think of the enlargement, it's a national process. So close coordination within your country, and I have noticed, and after listening, the Deputy Vice Prime Minister, that it is really what you are doing here. You try to have very inclusive progress. So that is important, because when you try to explain yourself, your positions to the member states, of course it's easier when you have consensus behind your positions. When you think of advocacy work, which is of course important, and there should be some kind of advocacy strategy, I'm sure, it is important to go to Brussels in all different levels. Of course, the political level is important, it's always, but then the ministries here, they should pay visits to their counterparts. Also, the Parliament is going to have its own counterparts, especially in the European Parliament side. I just noticed that now when the new European Parliament has chosen the members to their committees and delegations, that there was a Finnish new MEP who is going to be the head of the Ukraine delegation, just for your information. So at all levels, also the desk officers level, it is important, and to include also the stakeholders, the businesses, because they can support the government positions if you have done your homework here and you have coordinated it well. So that is about whom to meet. And then finally, very few words about the messaging, and that is something that it comes from the Finnish experience while we have been a member. And when you go to meet people, first, be clear and coherent in your messaging. Make it short. Prepare a non-paper to hand over, and rather a one-pager. And then select carefully those items that you want to raise up. Don't bring a Christmas tree. Nobody appreciates it. So no Christmas trees. Focus on the issues that are really, really very important to you, and let the nitty-gritty beside, because there is always very many issues coming from all over, so choose your battles. And I wish you very, very good success in your enlargement process, and I hope that we are able to help you in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us and for this amazing, very practical advices, I would say. Before we will move on in the discussion with other panelists, let me introduce our representative from Ukraine joined us. It is our deputy head of the office of the president of Ukraine, Ihor Zhovkva. He is responsible for Euro integration also issues, and I think that it would be valuable, Ihor, if it's possible, I know that you just came, but to give a little bit perspective, Ukrainian perspective, that we can continue our discussion. So how do you feel like for the future? Of course, like it was a momentum, very important momentum. In the previous panel, some our speakers told us that probably to open negotiations as the same difficult as to close them. So it's already an achievement. But what is our plan for the future? How we are going to preserve this momentum and how we are going to mobilize a political will for the next important steps, please?
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, the organizers, for having this possibility to speak and to meet with such distinguished panelists. Thank you for the advice, which I already heard. It's really needed. We will need the advice. That's why there's the idea of establishing several groups who will be advising to the delegation during the negotiations, which, as you rightfully say, started. It's really needed, and throughout all the meetings my president has with the leaders of the EU member states, he always asks from them, please do give us your best expertise, do give us your best people, do give us your chief negotiators or commissioners or ministers who will now advise us how to do it. Despite that, we all understand entering of Ukraine to the EU will be in quite different geopolitical circumstances than with any of your respective countries. That will be totally new experience for my country, and there will be totally new circumstances, not even in comparison with the member states which are now our neighbors and entered the European Union in the last 10 or 15 or 20 years. We have to be prepared for that process. The decision will be definitely political, but we have to be prepared absolutely 150 to 100%, like we're hearing from Brussels. And I do agree that the most important thing, except having these very important talks with the Commission, with the representatives of the DGs or whatever, we do it already, and we've been doing it since the beginning of the process, in long years, but especially after when my president placed a bid for membership on the 5th year of the war, of the open war of Russia against Ukraine. For the next day, my president was in constant dialogue with each and every leader of the member state. Our team, Office of the President, was in contact with the NSAs and foreign policy advisors of the member states. And I will tell you that member states significantly helped us when sometimes in Brussels we had procrastination, reflection period, food for thought or whatever, when some commissioners would suggest us after the bid for membership was endorsed during the European Council meeting on 25th of March, and we were asking, so where is our questioner? Some were suggesting us, take your time, check your pencils or pens or computers, are they working? Don't hurry up. You will receive the questionnaire in due time. What Ukraine did, we were preparing before, and probably Vice Prime Minister told you about her experience. An experience of the team of President was to reach to the President of the European Commission, asking, Madam President, we don't have any single day, we don't have any single minute for the procrastination coming from some in the European Commission. And that's why on 8th of April, Ursula von der Leyen, President Ursula von der Leyen, was here in Kyiv, when Kyiv was just, liberated. The surroundings of Kyiv were liberated from the Russian so-called army, and she was here with a draft questionnaire, handing it to my president. And when she asked, so you probably need a year at least, my president said, we will fill it in within 1 month. And on the 9th of May, my president was here on the VTC with President von der Leyen. She was in Strasbourg giving her State of the Union address. And my president presented 5,500 pages volume of the answers to the questionnaire. That's because we were prepared. That's because we were not starting from scratch. And that's because each and every line ministry, institution, office and President himself were working day by day, night by night, and that's because we were supported by our partners. The same was happening around June, when everyone was telling to us, look, I mean, okay, you've done the questionnaire, but it's impossible. It's impossible to get the decision on candidate status. The countries were going to it 5 years, 10 years, 1 year. We set the goal for us to have the decision as soon as possible at the nearest European Council. And day by day, night by night, my president was calling, meeting, talking, appealing to the parliaments and peoples of the nations. I remember this 3-day marathon just ahead of the 23rd of June when he was calling to each and every 27 leader. And the position were changing. I will not name the leaders, those who were coming in April, rather hesitant, telling, well, probably it's too premature for you. You should be credible, the process should be, don't hurry up. And those same leaders, when we understood that the decision will be positive, they told, well, I was in favor from the first day. Believe me, Mr. President, I was supporting you from the first moment. And then you remember this very important visit of 3 leaders, of Chancellor, of President of France, of Prime Minister of Italy and Romanian President. They were in Kyiv. After their visit, everyone understood that this is inevitable. So again, a record high speed. Then we were given these 7 steps. And again, we were hearing like, okay, it will take you 2, 3, 5 years or whatever. And when we deliver it, and we had a positive preliminary opinion, then there was additional 4 steps. And in the end, last December, it was again my president reaching to the leaders ahead of the meeting of the European Council in December, on the 14th of December, because we did understand that the position of the leaders of the EU member states will be crucial. Despite some procrastinations, despite some desire to, to speed up some other countries, Western Balkans, or, creating these artificial clashes between Ukraine and Western Balkans, we received this decision due to the position of member states. Concrete leaders with whom my president was talking in the night, from 13th to 14th of December. We were in Norway by that time, having the Ukraine Nordic summit. But even Prime Minister of Norway told my president, unfortunately, I'm not in the EU, but I would do my best to convince on the leaders, and he did. As well as the newly appointed Prime Minister of Poland. He was just sworn in on the 13th of December. And he was talking to my president in the night, and I know he did his good job. And this famous coffee drink, which happened on the next day, was due to many leaders, not only to Chancellor, who was literally taking him by the hand, but those who supported us and are supporting us. And that's why this decision on the 25th to start the negotiations is very important for us, because as we are told now, it's now mainly technical, so the negotiations are taking place. We started the phase of screening, as probably Vice Prime Minister told you. We will be moving this very thoroughly, very credibly, without not missing any single stage. We were told you have to be credible, so don't miss any stage, as it is in textbooks. We're doing this. But I can promise to you, we will be speeding up. We will be pushing. We will be asking the European Commission and member state to move at least with the half speed which Ukraine demonstrates. I think we have all the rights we deserve to have the same response or half the same response as Ukraine responding to all the demands, all the conditions of the European Commission and of the member states. For the time being, I think no one questions that this process is credible, that Ukraine is rightfully taking this stage of European integration. Where do we are now? As far as the next steps and the 5-year period, we're moving step by step now. For us, the most important task is to finalize the screening, the most part of it, at least around those 5 chapters which are in Cluster 1. And yes, we want to open the Cluster 1 as soon as possible, possibly during the Polish presidency. I think that's realistically. And that's what my president is telling to the leaders. Just recently at the EPC meeting, or before the NATO summit, he was talking to each and every leader, raising this issue. Mr. President, or Mr. Prime Minister, or Madam Prime Minister, can we open the Cluster 1 very soon? And then, after opening Cluster 1, not to wait for the closure of all the chapters of Cluster 1, but also think of parallelly open the other clusters. And this is the idea which we are discussing now with the member states and with the Commission. And I would like to hear your approach regarding this position, because, you know, I heard from some people telling this new approach which European Commission settled in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, this cluster approach, in fact, is being done in order not to single country to reach the membership in the foreseeable future. That's what we've been told by some not yet member states, but those who are having candidate status. So I would like to know, I mean, I would like to have the expert's opinion whether it is the case or not, because we will be trying, we will be doing this in order to speed up. The role of presidency is certainly very important, but we do understand that very important to have the strong expertise coming to from the Ukrainian delegation, and that's why we need your assistance. You saw that we formed this chief delegation, which is rather strong. The chapter by chapter delegations will be also formed very soon manner by the Cabinet of Ministers. So we will be ready. At the same time, we will be fulfilling our home task. Certainly, we will be undergoing the process of reforms. Once again, these fundamentals clusters is really much about reforms. And that's why, since we opened the negotiations, that proves that we are progressing rather good on the reforms, though we do understand that we still have some work to be done. But at the same time, if we are opening successfully fundamental clusters, I do understand that it will be much more easier for us, much more instrumental to open for the new clusters. So that is why probably, most likely, the approach of Ukraine to join the EU will be quite different from all the approaches which other countries were having and other countries are implementing right now. I'm talking about our Western Balkan partners. I'm talking about Moldova. We are in good coordination with Moldova. We just had a visit of Vice Prime Minister for European integration of Moldova. So in the end, we will be as ambitious as possible for a very simple reason. European integration, entering the EU, this process we're having right now, these days, is also a significant step, a significant brick into our victory. Our soldiers, our people living in Ukraine or who just had to temporarily leave for another countries, watching this with the most attention, with the utmost attention. And we cannot afford ourselves any single day, any single minute of procrastination or thinking or reflections or whatever. What we ask from our partners in the European Union, in the EU member states, to be on the same way with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ihor. As you heard from our deputy head of the Office of the President, speed, of course, commitment to the reforms and ambitious are going to be the main focus of Ukraine. But now we are coming to Brussels and to the member states. If they're ready to these three main, I would say, factors. And probably, Lykke Friis, if I can ask you to tell us a little bit, you've been European Affairs spokesperson of Denmark, and probably you know a little bit about the language. So you heard that we have some kind of frustration, and Ihor shared it. It's not just his feeling. I think it's feeling of many Ukrainians from the forefront to capital, and you know, also those who maybe not involved in Euro integration, but they have high expectations. So how do you feel about this language? Maybe we should explain in a different way. I don't know. Maybe we should deliver our messages differently. We already heard about Christmas tree, but, you know, except like concrete messaging, maybe we are doing something wrong, you know, and we just need to change our strategies.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm indeed very happy to be here, and my first name, Lykke, even means happiness in Denmark, so obviously I should be happy to be here. And talking about commitment, I think there should be no doubt about Denmark's commitment with regards to enlargement, or with regards to Ukraine as such. We have quite a track record to protect here, since Denmark, as you know, Copenhagen, that's where the Copenhagen criteria were agreed upon back in 93 when we had the presidency, and well, then the Big Bang enlargement negotiations were closed in Copenhagen in 2002. So from Copenhagen to Copenhagen, and now we should have the ambition to say from Copenhagen to Copenhagen and back to Copenhagen, because Denmark will have the EU presidency in the second half of 2025. So hopefully we'll be able then to push ahead with the negotiations and such. And personally, I can't see why it should not be possible to do that and not to wait for the fundamental cluster to be closed. So hope this will also be a message that I'll take back home. Talking about rhetoric, first of all, one will have to say that even though there is frustration here and we understand that, I think one will also have to say, coming with a metaphor, that negotiating with the European Union is like dancing with an elephant. But that's a fact. I mean, you here in Ukraine, that's obviously difficult. You have to agree upon a position, but you're united, as we've heard so far, and congratulations with that. But we are 27 member states, and well, we have to agree. And well, there will obviously, although that's a fact, when you look upon the opinion polls right now, there is a very high support for enlargement. But we also have a situation, the devil is in the details. I mean, that is what always happens when you look upon the various negotiations, enlargement negotiations that we've had. Suddenly, well, obviously you will have people saying, this is against my interests. So that is, I think, one thing that one should simply always remember. This should not be sort of an excuse for not really pushing ahead, but the EU is simply just a very slow animal by definition when you look upon enlargement. 3 pieces of advice from my side. The first one is very obvious because I already hinted at that. Keep the unity. Don't give the EU any kind of excuses about you not being able to agree and suddenly you have a very long-drawn negotiation among yourself. This will be a big sort of, excuse then for skeptics against enlargement. And some of the member states say, well, maybe we shouldn't go that fast. Well, they have to agree among themselves. So this would be the first thing that's important. Secondly, let the others do some of the hard work for you. Because you have, very strong friends, allies within the European Union. Count on us, but also ask us what to do. Make sure that you also, use the support that you have in the European Parliament. That was already said. Now a new European Parliament, they will also be able to help you not only in pushing your message, but obviously also in trying to explain those who are not that convinced about why it is such an important sort of task to enlarge Ukraine, because this is not just about you. This is also very much about us. If we don't enlarge with with Ukraine, personally, I don't think it will be a stable European Union. Because, countries, including my own, why on earth should we sort of continue seeing that European Union is our club if we are not able to enlarge, which is really, really also in our own security interest as such. I think this is also something that we really have to work on. Thirdly, it's very important that you also have other voices, independent voices, not just, excuse my French, voices from the government or voices from the parliament. We also need to have scholars. We need to have civic society, that also includes think tanks, coming out with knowledge about your country and obviously also sometimes making the case for Ukraine. Take a very important issue, Commission also mentioned it, anti-corruption. Yes, you should be able to communicate about that yourself, but we also need to have a debate where you are challenged. As government, and also when you have very strong sort of supporters and arguments with regards to anti-corruption here. But I think this would be an issue which would be really, really important, because even in my country, Denmark, if you ask people what they're worried about, then it is anti-corruption. So this would be something that you really, really have to make sure that you also have voices outside the government, sort of, questioning also you, but also coming out with the important knowledge to the rest of us. And here, final point. Yes, it is a completely different situation with regards to enlargement negotiations. You mentioned geopolitics. We have a war. Hopefully it'll soon be over. But we also have social media, right? I mean, this could be a huge asset for you. You're already doing it a lot, but keep on doing that. This is something when you also want to reach out to the younger generation. That's really your co-avenue with regards to that. But it can also be used against you, right?
That's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, and that's why you really have to have we were talking about an army before. You really have to have an army with regards to that as well. So this is obviously different than the various other accession processes that we have seen. Thank you very much. Sorry for being so long.
Thank you. Katarina Riskuk, we are going to move to you. You are very experienced, first of all, diplomat, with a lot of different capacities and experiences, both in Brussels, but also in your Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And my question, of course, is going to be obvious, to talk a little bit about diplomatic strategies. Maybe we didn't use something, or maybe we still can do something or strengthen our diplomatic position, or maybe, I don't know, maybe we need to have something unique. As long as we have unique, accelerating process, at the same time, maybe, we need to have a bigger team of diplomats in Brussels. Or, for example, to build, as you just said, to build this not formal ambassadors in Brussels and around in the member states. So could you talk a little bit about these strategies? And maybe from this we can elaborate a little bit about the also strategies of communicating reforms, communicating our situation on the ground. I know that many people, they are tired sometimes of the war. We hear this. Of course, it's hard to understand how you can be tired when you live in Ukraine, but still, we probably would appreciate your advice.
Thank you very much. I will try. But I first want to start with saying that you're doing a fantastic job already. I think just to do what you've done in these so difficult circumstances, that really, deserves all our admiration. But as the deputy head of the president's office said, maybe it's even more important in these difficult circumstances to advance very quickly with the negotiations. But I would also claim that it's, as Lykke said, as important for us in the European Union, because a union without Ukraine is not a secure union. So we share a very common goal. I will try, so many things already, but I'll give you, as Lykke, I will give you 4 points of advice, and I will give them as a basis. I was desk officer for Latvia in the European Commission, so Andris, who was in the panel, was my counterpart when Latvia was applying for membership. So I was compiling all the information and doing the regular reports. So that's one basis. But then I've also been an EU Sherpa participating in many European councils. So I know a little bit about the psychology among member states. What's a Sherpa? A Sherpa is an advisor to the Prime Minister who is trying to help him or her in the negotiations. Mm-hmm. So 4 points. You are having a schizophrenic negotiation, I would say, because you are negotiating with a counterpart that has exactly the same goal as you. And that's important. Membership, the commission which you are negotiating with, wants you to succeed, doesn't want to trick you, doesn't want to win over you, wants you to fulfill all the criteria. And that you should make use of. You should always ask the commission, so what are our gaps, what are our weaknesses, what information are we lacking? Because that's how Andris and I worked. Andris said, what really do you want more? What kind of information do you need from me in this area? So that, I think, see it as a win-win negotiation for both parts. The second reflection is that this is an operation in statistics and data gathering, and you are the experts. I mean, Ukraine is the nation of tech and IT and AI experts. I mean, you are so well placed to gather all this information and statistics, and they are not boring. They are your ammunition, because as we have been speaking, you need to document everything you do to convince everybody. You need to convince the Commission, the Parliament, the member states, the national parliaments, the business community, the civil society. So this data and information is extremely important. And then we come to communication. So once you've gathered all this ammunition, the statistics and the data, it is very important how you communicate it. And there you come to the advocacy strategy. And I would say Brussels is important, but I would almost say that capitals are even more important, because even though I've been working 10 years in Brussels and many of us has been there, the policies are not really formulated there. We receive instructions from the capitals. It is the domestic policies in the capitals that ultimately decide what instruction you get to close a chapter, for example. So your bilateral embassies in the capitals, you were mentioning you should maybe staff more people in Brussels. But I would say, though now I'm almost talking negatively about Sweden as a small country. Of course, you should beef in Sweden too, but I would say the big capitals, staff them well. And the capitals where you have very, not negative, but where you have skepticism, you need to understand the thinking in those capitals, because they will then give the instructions. So it's really, as it is unanimity, as was pointed out by Marja, you need to have all 27 also around. So your bilateral embassies are extremely important. So to my last point, advocacy, and sorry for being long, I will speed up here, but your advocacy strategy, there you need to think about the new geopolitical reality we're living in, because you see it more than anybody else. You see an aggression, you see a war. But in many member states, we haven't this international rule-based order with a global level playing field any longer. We have quite aggressive economic rivalry between also member states. We have, Cecilia knows this very well, we have tariffs increasing, we have subsidy race, we have protectionism. So this you need to build into your advocacy strategy. When you're explaining why do we need Ukraine as a new member state, and you know this much better than me, but here's a couple of hints to what you maybe could say why the EU needs Ukraine. I would say internal market. You are a fantastic addition with 40 million inhabitants to the internal market. Everything right now is about scaling up to compete with the US and China. With Ukraine as a part of the internal market, not only for consumers, but also for your human capital. You have a fantastic, well-educated human capital, IT and tech. I read that your ICT sector is the second largest in Central and Eastern Europe. You also have a unique ability to combat cyber threats and countering disinformation, something we can all learn about. And I read also that the first 40 days after the Russian invasion, you had 200,000 cyber attacks on the energy infrastructure, which you withstood. That is incredibly impressive. That's something you can tell us about in your advocacy strategy. I don't need to say food secure. You are one of the largest global food producers, very important in this more geopolitical situation where we talk about strategic autonomy. That's a buzzword in Brussels, really. And I also read you have very large sources of rare minerals. You have 2% of world uranium deposits. Also, you're not mining right now, but that is also something for the future. So I think in your advocacy, you can build in all your fantastic strengths. I think there's not a lack of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the positive thinking. I think that's very important for Ukraine. And with this positive thinking, we are moving to the last but not least, Hegni Christiansen. I know that you are current ambassador also to Norway. That's why, except like my general question, I would also ask you to elaborate a little bit, like with the large-scale invasion. Like we always had support of Nordic countries during this Euro integration process, but also since the war started in 2014. But with the large-scale invasion, like we really felt like the whole support in all the areas. And I think that strategically we also can build on this support and partnership for the future in terms of like not just acceleration of Euro integration, but building, you know, more deep trade relation and security relations. So I would appreciate if you like a little bit also allocate your time on commenting on this, because that's a unique opportunity. But in general, of course, we want to hear from you about the strategy in Brussels, but also maybe you can ask to what Ihor already mentioned and highlighted with this sectoral Euro integration and cluster to cluster, when you need to move forward, getting all the time this political consensus. It really could be very challenging and very politicized. So how do you feel we can like figure out, or maybe we need to push through the reformation of this system? I don't know, like, you know, everything is possible now, at least for Ukraine, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think the last point you made, it's a bit maybe close to my heart with the experience we have from our enlargement process, but it's not for this panel to address. I have my own opinion on that. I certainly realized that you are doing this in a very different context, let's say, not only the context we are living here in your country and in Kyiv for now because of the war, but also the ball game has a little bit changed in the EU with the new enlargement strategy and with this new sort of approach. We did our process chapter by chapter. We had not this cluster approach. But maybe if you would just allow me to go through a little bit through why we are here, two Icelanders not being a member of the EU, and just to put that into a context before I come back to your question. First of all, we with Norway and Liechtenstein, we are part of the single market through a specific agreement on the European Economic Area. And at the very, very end, or actually after you have concluded your enlargement process, you need to negotiate with us access to the European Economic Area. That's a separate process further down the road. So this means, and we concluded this agreement back in 1994, or became member of it in 1994. And this actually meant that we needed to align all our policies, all our legislation, all our administration to the single market legislation. So I sometimes call this sort of mini accession to the acquis, not to the institutions. I'm not going to go into the institutional element. So here we have experience of aligning administration and legislation to the EU acquis. Same goes for Schengen. We are full members of the Schengen cooperation. Same there. Alignment, and then of course application and the constant observation of the Commission, how we implement and apply. Then of course the second part is that we, yes, applied for membership in 2009. Background was very much economic collapse, and I know Stefán Haukur will go a little bit in more detail on that. And things I hear here and from people that reminds me very much of when we began our process in 2009. How enthusiastic you are, how optimistic you are. And I remember very well, I don't remember how many thousands of pages we delivered when we replied to our questionnaire, but it was big pile. Now, to cut a long story short, and that has relevance to what has been mentioned here in the previous panel and also here, how extremely important broad political consensus is for the process. Because we entered into the process with very narrow political majority. And that's the reason for why the process stopped in 2013. Change of government, process stopped, and there is where we are. A little bit about how we were organized, and that relates to how you will bring in stakeholders, civil society, because we had a very broad, inclusive process. We integrated into our negotiating teams the stakeholders. So we had the stakeholders with us when we established our negotiating positions in individual chapters. And then we broadened that up a little bit with establishing a specific consultation committee with the civil society and others. Then we had from Parliament very detailed opinion that was extremely helpful in preparing our negotiating positions. And then an element when it comes to, let's say, information strategy, we made everything public, including our negotiating positions. And this was a part of trying to continue with this inclusiveness and our way to communicate to the people what we were doing. So we don't need it to be sort of forced to bring things out forcefully. It was basically there. People could read it. And that was also one of the reasons that we brought, let's say, stakeholders very close to the process. And all of this you can even find on the web, use for your own reference. It could be helpful. Now, a few final points on this, and that is taken from our own experience. I mean, one thing is the acquis. And you are going through the process now with the screening, and where the acquis is explained, you come with your questions and plans on how you are going to align to the acquis. But there are other issues. And I think you have already seen some issues of that kind. That is bilateral issues, something that you don't take from the acquis. And some of these issues can be extremely difficult, and they were in our case. For instance, we had an absolute, completely bilateral issue related to a collapse of one bank. That was an issue with the UK. And that made it extremely difficult for us in different areas of the negotiations. And then we had another issue with the EU in principle, where UK and Ireland were involved. And to no surprise, that was fisheries. So keep close eye on any issues that might be out there. Maybe one member state, maybe a few member states that have such issues, but they can make your life extremely, extremely difficult. Now, one other piece of advice, try to concentrate on difficult chapters that you know that will consume long time, because that will be an advantage towards the end. Now, others have mentioned this, but I'm going to put it into our context with all the alignment we already had through the EA agreement and through Schengen. This is a marathon process, and 4 years were not enough for us with all the alignment that we had. Now, some others have mentioned this, but I'm going to mention this as well. I know some say this, that the Commission is your best friend. Commission is your ally. Never look at the Commission as your enemy. It is, after all, they that, to a large extent, control the speed. They bring the issues to the Council. They, in our experience, are very good, are good advisors. And I just can wholeheartedly agree with I think it was Cecilia that mentioned that it is a whole Commission. I mean, with some of our most difficult issues, we were, of course, not only engaging with DG enlargement, but also the line DGs. And of course, I agree, it's extremely important to keep very close contacts and relations with the member states. They, at the end of the day, decide. And if you take the first parts of the process, because we have experience with that in our process, the use of opening benchmarks, it can be extremely important to work on member states to try to avoid, to the extent possible, to get benchmarks, because they just delay the process. I think I stop here. Yeah.
Okay, but still, I have very short question with the strategic partnership with Nordic countries. So, do you feel that it is an momentum which we can build on? And if yes, so what should be the focus for this? But very shortly, 1 minute.
Yeah. I
will very strict with time. Sorry.
No problem. No, but what I thought when I heard this question, and so I would broaden it up. I would broaden it up to NB8. I mean, the representation of this group here. And I'm saying that because the Nordic cooperation as such is a bit narrow. It is sort of Nordic focused, while the NB8 cooperation is more broad. It is international, and it is getting more and more focus into different areas, not only foreign policy, but other issues as well. And I think to use the NB8 as a focus, because there you have all the Nordic EU member states, plus the Baltics, that would be more, in my mind, more focused approach than to focus on only the Nordics.
Okay, thank you so much. Ihor, I will have now a round of very short questions, and I will ask you to keep 2 minutes to answer them, that we have opportunity to ask the audience questions. But you now heard the round of different advices, and strategies. But in the very end of the day, we're a big country, in the middle of the war. We don't have for now, I'm afraid, 40 million people. We have much less people, many of them abroad because of the aggression of Russian Federation. And human resources for us now is a huge challenge. And of course, we need to, operate in limited resources, and we are stretched. So with all these challenges, if we can ask about something, our colleagues, Brussels, our respectful partners, what would it be? I don't know, several very strategic things, I don't know, resources, capacity, etc. How do you feel? What would be the main things to ask?
Well, we are already asking, certainly resources. I mean, from what we started, the experience, again, we probably won't be moving to the EU. We will not be inventing the bicycle. It's everything in the textbooks. Yes, it's everything in the agreements. And once again, we are told to go to have this process as credible as possible, and we will follow each and every item, each and every chapter, and we will do it. And we will take into account, we would like to take into account the experience of the countries which entered the EU, some drawbacks, some mistakes they were making, but for us not to make. The technique of this process, because it's really difficult. Probably these negotiations will be one of the most difficult Ukrainian officials are ever would be having. And we do understand this. Or maybe we would not understand the whole scope, then please, we will be welcoming this resource. Again, those people who are sitting here, as well as the people whom we are communicating also, I hear that you're ready to share your knowledge, you're ready to share your experience. I like all of your advices. I'm, more or less relieved for the time being. We're doing according to your advice. Hopefully this will be the case in future. Secondly, thank you for this position that really Brussels matters. Not in a single moment we have Brussels as our enemy. We have Brussels as our friend, especially with let's be very honest, we are satisfied with the new leadership of the European Commission, or old new leadership, or whatever, reinstated leadership, and with the other institutions. So we are not having enemy in Brussels, and that's very important. We will see the composition of the Commission, which also put some hopes on the commissioners as well, etc. We'll not elaborate on this. But yes, we felt it, maybe, by our gut feelings, but you are convincing today me that capitals are important. That's what we felt immediately when we placed this bid for membership. Capitals will support it. And once again, we managed to turn the position of some capitals in a very small period of time. Again, from skepticism, from it will not be possible in the foreseeable future, to let's do it together. So your connection, your expertise, your connections in your capitals would be also another thing which we would be asking to have. And certainly, I agree that now we are having not that potential as we might have before the open aggressions, but we are having this process during the fighting against Russian aggression, and that's our circumstances. For certain period of time, hopefully for very short period of time, we will be having this burden, as well as the burden of negotiating technical, on the very technical and detail level. Very important, and this is the third thing I would ask for from all the countries, not to lose hope in Ukraine, to always believe that Ukraine will win, to be with us not as long as it takes, but in order to have our victory. That is a huge, morale-raising approach which my president asks from the leaders, which he asks when talking to your parliaments, to your people. Do not lose hope in Ukraine, in Ukrainians. Those Ukrainians who are temporarily now leaving your countries, in fact, they made already this European integration. You look at them, they are hardworking, they are knowledgeable, they master your languages, they want to officially work in your countries when you get these permissions. But we are hoping that most part of them will return to Ukraine immediately after the victory, enriched with this, in fact, de facto European aggression, living together with your nations, as the same Europeans as your nations as well. So very important not to lose this hope in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. I think that's absolutely the crucial thing, that we will have the mutual vision of our mutual future, and then, of course, it would be much easier to move on. But I have several questions there, like you can pick up on any of them, but I think they are very important. So we have in the audience a lot of representatives of the expert groups, civil society, think tanks, which are going to be advocates of Ukraine in Brussels, but also probably sometimes they will be also criticizing, I don't know, governments, or maybe lacking of the progress in terms of European Commission and Ukrainian communication, etc., etc. So it would be interesting to listen to you. What would you tell them how they should build their strategy in terms of communication with European Commission, of course, Brussels, but also in alignment of this strategy with the government, with the parliament, and still in the very end of the day, it is in our mutual interest, I mean Ukrainians, because I'm sure that in this whole you are not going to find anyone who doesn't want to end up as a European Union member. So it means that we have one and the same vision. The second one, role of the local governments, role of the communities, like cities and regions, etc., etc. We have different ones. They're in different circumstances, with different understanding of the Euro integration process and also capacities. If you have any suggestion how it's better to involve them in this process, it would be also very interesting to listen. And last but not least, education. We already talked about this at the previous panel a little bit, but we will need really army of experts in different areas. How to work with finances, with grants, with structural funds, how to communicate with bureaucracy, with Brussels, of course, lawyers, acquis, standards, etc. But it's like huge number, and we can't think just only about advisors and people coming from other countries. We need to build our own capacity. So what would be your suggestion in terms of building this capacity properly, but at the same time fast? Anyone who want? Yes, please, Katrine.
Thank you. Just to pick up on your last point, which I think is extremely important, and there we are in the same boat, because I'm sad to say that I was head of the European Commission in Sweden, but the knowledge of the EU in Sweden, and we've been members for 30 years, is extremely low. And we still haven't found, maybe you can help us on this once you figure it out, how to spread information. But at least we had, at our small delegation of the European Commission, we had 2 strategies working with multipliers. So working with journalists and with teachers. And journalists, very important to brief them the whole time, because then they can multiply the information in media, of course. And then with teachers, we invented something called school ambassadors. And this is also funded by different EU programs. So the delegation here could help you, sending them to Brussels, and then also educating them here, of course, in Kyiv. And that also, just one teacher can reach so many students over the years. So it's a really good investment to invest in multipliers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Of course. Marja?
I would like to continue what Katarina said, and I truly agree with you that the knowledge of EU is surprisingly low in Finland too, so it takes time. Of course, the role of the schools when you're, well, you should have some kind of courses explaining also to the higher level students about the EU, because they are probably the future civil servants also in the Commission, so that they kind of little by little they know about the European Union. But then what we did in Finland during our accession process, I remember it very well, because there was a joke. We send always to the villages far from Helsinki, to different places, EU negotiators to go and explain difficult issues. And there, we had a lot of difficulties negotiating the agricultural chapter. And then there were some of these farmers in one place, that there was the full audience there, and then 2 negotiators went to the podium. And they happened to be very tall and very large-scale men. They came there, and one of the farmers shouted, "Oh, you were so afraid that you just sent so big guys here to explain us the things." So we did a lot of footwork at that time. And I think that is important all the time, everywhere. So that's about the education. And then just to mention about the local government, it's important as they are the ones who have to then finally implement a very large part of the acquis, which is decided. Thank you.
Thank you. Likke?
Very, very briefly, I mean, peer-to-peer is the most important sort of advice. I mean, that you would have business community in various member states working with business community here. I mean, let's take Denmark, so Confederation of Danish Industry working with your Confederation of Industry, university, I mean, cities and cities, I mean, cooperating, learning from each other. I mean, they are the ones who know the drill, so to speak, and they also know, I mean, what are the tricks and what are those things you should definitely not do. I think that would be very important, maybe also for this group when I go home, also suggest to my own government to step up with regards to that commitment. When we had the accession with the Baltic countries, Denmark was very active with regards to educating a lot of the negotiators. Whenever I go abroad, I always meet somebody who studied in Denmark or in Aarhus, which is a part of Denmark. But I just wanted to go back to your question at a certain stage, whether one should transform the overall process. I mean, that's obviously a very sort of big ambition to have. But I think now that the new, who's actually the old, obviously, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, in her sort of policy guidelines, said that we should, within first 100 days, have a strategy or a pre-enlargement review. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very important sort of statement. And one could also use that from your side to say, and Andris pointed that out as well, I mean, are there areas where you can already now participate more than you are doing in order then maybe to avoid the try to control the frustration that you referred to earlier by making sure there'll be some sort of assets with regards to membership or benefits that you already could receive now? That could be one important part of that discussion. But I think one should also look into whether it is possible already now to have observer status. Why not have observer status in the council? Why not have observer status in the various sort of agencies of the European Union, or there's also the European Parliament? I mean, this would be probably the best, not to be condescending, but the best training exercise that you could get. I mean, being in the room yourself. And secondly, it would also, for us as present member states, really create the understanding that enlargement is not far away in the future. Enlargement is already happening now, and we should, in all our countries, make sure that we are now preparing, but also really sort of getting to know each other. To use, I mean, to put it in a very direct way. Thank you.
Thank you. Hegni, do you want to tell something like to conclude?
Yeah, just this point you mentioned on communication. I think it is important to keep in mind that you will be challenged with all kinds of myths. Things are this and things are that, which are not true. I mean, we are dealing with this every now and then, and I can go back to our EEA accession. Then one of the myths was that I'm just saying this like it was. The Germans will come and buy up all our salmon rivers. The Spaniards, the Greeks, the Portuguese, they will take over the Icelandic labor market. Of course, it was not like that. Number two, on what you can do to explain, let's say, the acquis. What we did, in first instance, we created a 2-page about every single chapter and published it just to try to explain what is this chapter about. Then, of course, you need to do it in more detail. And then there we try to use quite a lot the instruments that are available in the enlargement process. Where the Commission is supporting, either supporting experts to come to you from the Commission or from the individual member states, focusing on different areas. And then on local governments, we basically included them in our teams, so they will always part of the whole process from the very beginning. That was part of being inclusive.
Thank you. Thank you for these advices and conclusions. If there is one question in the room, I'm ready to take it. If not, I suggest that you can go have coffee and talk, because as we understood from the previous panel, probably there are a lot of future members of the European Parliament here or Euro commissioners, so take this opportunity for the future. And thank you for this great panel.